Hello, this is Aquila Cat here, aka Elise, and in this video I'm going to go over ways to figure out what career would work best for you, and also just in general, just to figure out what you want to do with your life. Now, this can be helpful both if you are pretty young, like teenage, early 20s, or even if you're like in your 30s like I am, and making a switch, or even if you're older. But anyway, here is how I'm going to organize this video. So there are many different ways to sift through all of the innumerable options for potential careers. Some of the ones that I'm going to go through with are like things that perhaps you were good at doing or liked doing when you were a child, hobbies that you had when you were growing up or ones that you have now, career aptitude tests, personal experience. This is especially for the adults like me who are going back into it. And then 80,000 hours introspection. And I'll go more into what that is in a bit. I will go into detail on my own path so far and what plans I have for my future, just to give you an example of how this kind of goes down and what I myself have discovered over time. And then I'll go over the different ways to narrow down your own options to help you out specifically. I will go over what you can do now to try and figure that out. And I will then wrap up with miscellaneous things to keep in mind that didn't quite fit into other categories. I will also be utilizing the chapters feature for this video. Starting off with my own path. In the beginning, the very first job I ever had was one that my mom got for me through working for the local health department. I went out with a supervisor and a cop and went to various mini-marts when I was 15 and asked to buy cigarettes. And if they sold them to me, which I'm surprised that a lot of them did, considering that when I was 15 I looked 11, I would take the change out to the supervisor, and she and the cop would go in and talk to them, fine them, take away their tobacco license, whatever the case may be. Very stressful job, especially considering how shy I was. That didn't last very long, and then I worked at a mall food court in my senior year for from like autumn to spring, when I discovered that I literally could not handle the heat of the kitchen. I would go back to the deep freezer multiple times during my shift just to function. And then I didn't work again until after I graduated college and got my associate's degree and got a job through my externship working as a veterinary technician at a vet hospital. I worked there for about 3 years until the clinic shut down for financial reasons. And after that, I was kind of lost for about a year. I couldn't find a job immediately as a vet tech, so I think I ended up working at an assisted living facility as kind of a waitress for their cafeteria. That lasted less than a month because there was only so much I could deal with the old lechers stalking me around at the end of the shift while I was cleaning up the tables. And there was one guy who was more middle-aged who just really creeped me out, and I just did not want to deal with any of that. So I quit, and then I ended up getting a job at another veterinary hospital where the veterinarian was extremely condescending, and we only did surgeries once a week, so it was difficult to really learn their procedures when you were only doing it once a week. She made me cry at one point during lunch, and so I quit. And then I went to a temp agency, worked at a warehouse for a while, a DHL warehouse. FYI, do not ship through DHL if you have anything fragile. Even if it's marked fragile, most of the workers don't care. And even if they do care, if you're shipping out of the area, we have these 6-foot tall boxes, maybe 7-foot tall boxes, that we literally had to toss packages into. So even if we want to be careful with it, sometimes we can't. So just don't ship through DHL. They don't care about fragile items. And then I got another job through another veterinary hospital after that. And I worked there until I moved to Oregon with some friends from Utah. And I didn't realize until after I moved to Oregon that veterinary technicians are basically required to have their national certification here. In Utah, they really didn't care, so I never bothered to take the test, the exam. So I planned to just get whatever job I possibly could here, and then save up enough money to take the exam, and then get certified, and then get back to the veterinary field. What ended up happening was I became a receptionist for a law firm that was really desperate for a receptionist at the time. And within 6 months, I had been promoted to be one of the legal assistants for the owner of the firm. And I have been there ever since. Now, motivations to change direction. In the past, it's just been I needed a job. And so I found a new job, and it was necessary. Like, I intended to take an exam to do it, take a certification. Ended up just in a completely different field that I was good at and that I stuck with. Now, my motivation to change is that I earn about $40,000 a year now. Unfortunately, that is no longer enough to survive on your own. And I just realized that as much as I adore and love this job, and as much as I love my boss and my coworkers, I won't have enough retirement to live off of when I get old enough to retire if I continue on this path. And also, I realized a little over a year ago, I felt a longing, like a homesickness, for a place I've never been, which is Ireland. I have felt this homesickness many times in the past over the years, at least since I was a preteen. But this time, something different happened. I realized, why am I longing and dealing with the longing pain of being homesick for this place, when instead I could just go and be there. So I started to change my line of thinking, and I started researching everything I could of what was needed for me to get to Ireland, what the citizenship was like, everything about that, and it ended up resulting in me figuring out that because I'm one generation too late to apply through Ancestry, and because I have no critical skills that Ireland will hire foreigners for, it is in my best interest to go back to school and to take a different path. So that is my main motivation for what I'm doing now. Also, COVID had a play in that too. That is when I kind of realized that I couldn't continue living as I'm living now and still be okay when I retired. Also, during COVID, I broke up with my boyfriend, and if you don't already know about that, you can go look at my past video about it. It was a whole thing. I ended up being very angry afterward and very lost, and I just needed a goal that he and I hadn't planned together. So marriage out of the picture, adoption out of the picture. I couldn't even think about those things. And so the only goal I could think of was to get a house. We hadn't discussed living together yet, hadn't discussed getting a house or anything. We were going to save those plans and discussions for after we actually got engaged. So he hadn't tainted the idea of having a place of my own yet. So that is what I started doing all of my research for, was what I needed to save up to get a house, how much I needed to save up, what went into being a house owner, all of the repairs and maintenance involved, just everything. I spent every waking most of my downtime researching things about how to obtain a house. And then about 6 months into that is when I had the realization that I could just go to Ireland. And that's when I switched all of my energy from focusing on getting a house to getting to Ireland. And for over a year, that's where my mind has been at. That is it for the section on me. Now, for part of the ways to sift through all the options for potential careers in general. So look to your childhood. Look to things that you liked doing as a kid, things that you enjoyed, hobbies that you had. And also, if you are younger and like in high school or like college age, know that it's okay not to know what you want to do with your life. Like, not very many people do. When I went to college, I grew up thinking I wanted to be a veterinarian, and then I realized how much math was involved in obtaining that. And then after I was a veterinary technician, I realized that I didn't want the life and death responsibility on my own shoulders. But in my first year of college, when I wasted a year at the state university, I ended up majoring in linguistics and minoring in theater just because I didn't know what the hell I wanted to do. In high school, I wanted to be a translator. I considered that, like working for the government or the military, just as a translator or interpreter. I loved languages. I figured I could do that. And then I talked to one of the Army recruit booths at high school and realized that even translators and interpreters need to go through boot camp. And that's when that idea went out the window. Like, I could barely handle gym/PE class. There was no way in hell I was going to manage boot camp. But, like, think of things that you wanted to do as a kid. Things that you could do similarly now. Were you really interested in animals as a kid? Any particular animals? Did you like to tinker with things? Like playing with Legos? Like anything that could, liking animals obviously could relate to the veterinary field or zoology or something like that. Legos easily could be engineering, architecture. Also look at things that you were good at in school. And with this, note that just because you were bad at something in school doesn't mean that you can't learn it later. But, like, focus on what you were good at in, like, K through 12. Like, for instance, I was looking through all of my records from elementary school and saw that I did really great in my biology classes even back then, and had especially good grades when it came to, plant biology and ecology. And I have focused on that now. I am starting classes in April for a bachelor's degree in botany and aim to specialize, depending on how things go, either in ecology or genetics, something. I also took a genetics class in high school, and that was really interesting. So focus on what might have piqued your interest in school with extracurricular classes that weren't necessarily needed that you liked. Like any language classes or science, any extra math classes you liked, clubs that you were interested in. Like, just focus on things that you liked and that you were interested in now or when you were younger, and look to ways that you can apply that in your adult years to make money. Because, work doesn't have to be soul-sucking. You spend a great deal of your time as an adult at work, so you should enjoy what you are doing. And you can. And another thing that I found when I was looking through school records was traits that your teachers might have commented on, and being able to translate that to careers. For instance, a lot of mine mentioned that I had a really close attention to detail, really good at listening to instructions, was really focused, and helped out my peers a lot whenever I could. And so I've kind of used those to also help guide me on what I wanted to do now. And then if you liked to volunteer, or if you are thinking of volunteering, like during summer or the weekends or something, or if there are any clubs that you liked, utilize those as well. And so the next up is aptitude tests, career matching tests. With me, there was the ACT test in high school that also kind of went along with an aptitude test, that it gave me ideas of things to do. Like, it said that I should be a ranger and like a few other kinds of things. Consider those tests that they have you take in high school to kind of career match. It may not even interest you now, but in the future it might. So just keep those in mind and keep the results of those tests for future use. For the older folks like me, look into your adult experience. Or for those who are in college now, use the general core courses that they force you to take to find out what you do or don't like, and what you may have been interested in that you didn't think you were before. For instance, when I was in college for the first time, I took a Plant and Societies class, I think it was called, and I still have fond memories of it today and things that I remember from that class now, over a decade later. So like that and a few other things is kind of what pushed me into going into botany for this bachelor's degree. And also, it's never too late to change careers. You do not have to be confined to a single career your entire life. That may have been the old school way of thinking, but it's not how it has to be. Like, life is too short. Why stick to just one thing? Especially if, like me, you like learning. Just try a bit of everything that interests you. I am 33 and have had 2 big careers already and am in process of getting into a 3rd career. And like 33 is honestly pretty young to be making a big switch like this. There are many people I know personally from like social media groups for this kind of thing, and also just in general, who are making big changes later in their lives, say in their 40s, in their 50s, or even later. You're never too old to go in a different direction. Just do it. There are so many people who have made a switch in their lives to do something completely different. And it's worked out great for them. It can work great for you. I really want to hammer it in that you don't have to be stuck with one career for the rest of your life, and don't think that you're ever too old to make a change. If you want to make a big change in your life, if something else you feel is calling to you, do it. Utilize skills that you obtained through past jobs. My ex-boyfriend, I'll use him as an example. He had one job after high school as receptionist for a psychiatrist office, I believe. But other than that, he was highly encouraged by both of his parents to go into grad school. So he did not get any job skills in his adult life. He was just grad school only. So he can research and teach, and that's about all he knew how to do. However, like, I got my associates when I was 20, 21, and had been in the workforce ever since. And there are a lot of jobs I've had and a lot of skills that I obtained through those jobs, like customer service, how to be tactful in discussions, how to handle group projects, how to lead group projects, how to manage schedules, just a whole bunch of little things that a lot of jobs like retail and customer service that tend to suck the life out of you but also teach you some vital skills are helpful for the future. You can use those skills in future careers and then focus on skills that may cross over from one career to another. For instance, like as a veterinary technician, I learned how to think on my feet, how to deal with emergencies, and how to connect with and talk with people who are going through some really difficult times in their lives, with their pets being sick or even worse. And there was a surprising amount of crossover from that to the legal field as a legal assistant. Funnily enough, the other legal assistant at work now also came from a background as a veterinary technician. So there's obviously something between the veterinary field and the legal field that cross over and overlap pretty well. Whether that's dealing with people going through very difficult times in their lives and just being empathetic and knowing how to talk to them and what to say and how to get the information that you need to send to the attorney to help them, things like that. And then things that I'm doing now are trying to look at skills that would cross over both from my vet tech and legal assistant backgrounds to a future career that will also combine skills from those and with what I will learn in my bachelor's degree with botany. Through your adult experience, you can also learn red flags and things that you just aren't good at or incapable of. For instance, I am physically incapable of physical labor jobs. I am a runt. I am weak. I am not very physically strong. And I have spine issues that have developed over time, thanks to one leg being like slightly shorter than the other, which has potentially led to every single problem that I've had since 2014. But like, a lot of people are really good at physical labor jobs. They pay well. There is no shame in it. If you are strong, go for it. Do it. And if you are weak, like me, probably not the best idea because you might hurt yourself even worse. So desk jobs are better, personally, for me. And they might be or might not be for you. But learn things that you hate. For instance, I cannot work with the food industry. I suck at cooking. I literally cannot handle the heat of the kitchen. And I know this about myself, and so I will not do it. I also hate phones, especially cold calls. So I would rather move back in with my parents in Utah than work at a call center. Just straight up. I refuse to do that. And one thing that's actually really good now that wasn't really common, or as common at least, before COVID, is remote work. If you are not fond of interaction with people, especially face-to-face interaction, working remotely might be the best option for you. And there are plenty of opportunities now for that. Just work to your strengths. Focus on jobs that will cater to your strengths and that will allow you to avoid things that you hate or literally cannot do. Set goals, but be flexible. So, for an example, with me, like I have a goal to end up in Ireland, but I'm trying to be flexible with what I do to get there. At first, I was wanting to just get a bachelor's degree here to start off with, just to make sure that I could, and then apply directly to a school in Ireland for a master's degree immediately and just go right into it, start off in Ireland, end up in Ireland, get a job there. However, now I'm being more flexible with that because Ireland is very expensive to live in, and the tuition is about as expensive as it is here in the USA. And they also have a major housing crisis going on. It would be very difficult for me to find a place as a student that would allow me to bring the cats with me. And one thing I will not be flexible about is, if I go, the cats go. They're going to come with me. Any place that I live has to be okay with the cats. So I'm trying to be more flexible and looking into countries like Belgium and Germany for a master's degree. Belgium is, there's still tuition, but it's much, much cheaper. And they are also pretty pet friendly. So I would have a far greater chance of finding a decent place to live in Belgium while I'm going to school than I would in Ireland. And then in Germany, it's free tuition. Yes, there are school fees, administrative fees. You're looking at maybe a few €100 a semester, but that's still so much better than, $10,000 a year at a school here in the USA. They are also very pet friendly in Germany, and it would be easiest in Germany for me to find a place to live that would allow the cats. A longer train ride to Germany, but still, doable. So I'm sort of keeping all of these things in mind and being open-minded about how I get to my goal. I have my set goal of ending up in Ireland, whether that's through going to school there or finding a place to work afterwards that would allow me to transfer to Ireland later, and have as many backup plans as you possibly can have. There's no way to know if your plan is going to work for the future, and you need to be aware of that, because if you have backup plans already in mind, it's much easier to adapt to that and to just move on to the next plan and keep moving forward, is the idea. It's also important, it's not necessary. I didn't need this until now, in my 30s, basically. But to have, what the Legally Blonde musical mentions, a chip on your shoulder. So a personal reason to do something, whether that's you want to make as much money as possible and you use that to guide your way as to what you want to do as a career, or you want to give your family a better life, or you have kids and a family of your own, you want to do whatever you can to support them the most, or say you want to just help in general. And so you focus on things that will allow you to help the people around you, your local area, your state, region, country, or maybe the world in general. Just focus on your goal. Having a goal like that, a chip on your shoulder, will make it easier to continue with your plan. So 80,000 hours. This is a website I found while doing my own research that has been an enormous help to me. It helps you focus on perspective. It goes over what the current global issues are and how you can help contribute to solve them. It gives ideas for a few different paths, like whether you want to go into politics or computers, AI, sciences, research. Like, there are so many different things that you can go into that this website, this organization can help guide you with. It also goes into things like on startups, entrepreneurship, and also just a note for entrepreneurship, I will put a link down below for a website that's good for small businesses. It's called Score. It just gives a lot of good resources and just advice and information for how to start up your own business if you have an idea for that. Personally, what I did with 80,000 hours. So what they do is they offer a career plan template. They have you read a whole lot of different articles about global issues and how to fix them, and what you can do yourself to contribute to fixing them in ways that apply to you, that focus on your own interests and strengths. And as part of a way to figure out what your interests and strengths are and to help narrow down the options, these are some of the things that they ask you about. So just basically going over the template, they ask you, what does a fulfilling, high-impact career look like for you? What are your career goals? It asks you to clarify your views of which of the global problems they go over are the most pressing, because all of the global issues and problems are pressing, and everybody is going to have their own priority as to which one is most pressing to you. So focus on the ones that you find are the most important and go from there. And then it helps you generate ideas for longer term paths. Like, there are short-term goals that you can have and longer-term goals. The template will help you clarify your strategic focus on how to best approach getting to this point to help solve the issues, how to just strategize for yourself on how to get to where you want to be. And then it can help you determine your best guess next career steps, provides you with a plan to adapt. A lot of this is because, what I said earlier about have set goals, but be flexible, being adaptable with your future goals is going to be important because things are going to change, both in your life, in the world, and it's important to have ideas of how to adapt to that for your future. And then it can help you find ways to get feedback, to investigate key uncertainties with your plan, and how to make a judgment call, and then how to put your plan into action. So for me, what a personally fulfilling career looks like for myself, it would include a sense of meaning or helping others, a sense of achievement, an engaging work environment with autonomy where I can still have some control over what I'm doing and just focus on that and get work done, but also keep my interest and change enough, basically not be boring and repetitive enough that it just makes work interesting. Having supportive colleagues and having sufficient basic conditions such as, fair pay, non-crazy work hours, things like that. As for clarifying views of which global problems were most pressing, my prioritized ones were climate change adoption, ways that I could help with that, like public outreach or research, climate change, slowing and reversal, such as reducing carbon footprints, combating flooding, accessibility to healthcare and treatment, like affordability, distance to doctors, reliability on technology, safekeeping knowledge for future use to keep it from being lost, which would include things such as, backups and safeguarding, increasing global communication and ways to easily translate, interpret, and communicate to share knowledge and ideas, making access to education more accessible, homelessness, nuclear warfare, such as reacting to it, recovering from it, or preventing it, ecology, maintenance, balance, and repair, such as with conservation and research, global pandemics, including like preparation for it, response to it, and recovery from it, and overpopulation, including sustainability. So those were the big global issues that I personally came up with for my list, generating ideas for longer term paths and plan. Like I've done this by, applying to everything I was remotely qualified and capable to do back when I was looking for a job, just any job at all. Developing transferable career capital. This includes things such as, personal skills, work skills, connections, networking, resources to tackle a variety of pressing concerns, capitalizing on strengths, coordinating with others in a community, things like that, having backup plans. And then capitalizing on strengths. With things that you are weak at, it mentions like that you can bring those up to a passable level, or you can find a path for your future that doesn't require those weaknesses. Or you can find a team who's strong enough so that somebody else on the team is strong with the things that you are weak at, and you might be strong with things that they are weak at, just so, it's well-rounded and things are getting done because everybody's strengths and weaknesses are, strategically focused on. So it focuses on like how you can do the most good in your own community. And then like when it talks about long-term career paths, through everything that I've researched and 80,000 hours, like some of the ideas personally for me are to like contribute to research through genetics and or ecology for an environmental or animal welfare organization or company, ideally an international one, just to help me get to Ireland kind of thing. And then doing the same for like biomedical stuff for a pharmaceutical company, perhaps, if I end up being really good at chemistry and microbiology while I'm going through school. No idea if that's going to be something that sticks in my mind, but if it does, that's an option I'm considering. I can do direct work in operations or administrative work for an organization or company that is aiming to do work globally to help, with some of these global issues. Advocacy work, like focus on policies in a governmental or international department, or working in operations or administrative tasks for a governmental or international department. I could be a researcher, which is something that I'm kind of looking into, or like a research assistant. Maybe something with forensics or genetics. Like I could be a expert witness for court or something with forensics, or just with genetics work or something for the government or an organization. I don't know. Like, I do not know what will happen with my future, but these are things that I'm keeping in mind as potential long-term goals and things that I could get into. And then clarifying strategic focus. This included things like immediate impact potential. How much will the steps that you are taking help you to contribute to solving a pressing problem? A specialist career capital potential, like how much will the steps that you are taking advance you toward your best guess long-term paths? Like these are basically just setting yourself up for success for what you want to do in your future. And determining your best guess next career steps. For me, this is education. I've done a lot of self-research already and self-study to do this over the last year, and I've taken the step to enroll in college and I start classes in April. I have an idea of what general core classes and extra classes to take, to find out what I might like and what I might not, just to further narrow down my path for what I want to end up doing for a master's degree later on, which will also determine, what country I end up in based on whatever school and master's program best piques my interest in a few years once I have a bachelor's degree. So planning to adapt, like nothing remains the same. Everything changes, even you. Like your own interests and desires may change with time. That is okay. We are changing with our environment and our own experiences in life, and experiences can change who we are at times, which, impacts our future. So, make contingencies, backup plans for potential risks. Like if you lose your job right now, what is your game plan? What is your backup? Do you have a backup? Do you have an idea of what you're going to do? Do you have a place to live if you lose your current place? Things like that. Just having ideas of how to handle things should the worst come to pass. So like, for instance, right now my plan A is, I don't know, going into forensics, doing some sort of focus on genetics or ecology, being a researcher, maybe getting a PhD if necessary. Plan B is, being a biologist research assistant that just needs a master's degree, or just being a research assistant for genetics or ecology, whatever focus I end up going into. And, like plan Z, if everything goes wrong, I can either move back in with my parents in Utah, or, hopefully move back here to Oregon and continue where I left off. And then the investigating key uncertainties and making a judgment call. Personally, my main uncertainty with my plan is, can I handle chemistry? So like with my bachelor's degree in botany, it does require a lot of chemistry classes and organic chemistry classes. So I'm doing a lot of self-study right now through Allison and through YouTube videos in general, just to see how well I can understand the basics of chemistry to help prepare me for these classes, to give me the best chance possible to succeed and pass them with the best scores that I can. Do I want to go for a PhD? Or do I want a doctorate? Or do I want to just stop at getting a master's degree? I, right now, do not know. That just kind of depends on what happens in the future, and that I'm just kind of going with the flow right now. So the ideal is to make sure that your analysis of everything, your emotions, your plan, and your intuition all line up. And then you can make a judgment call. Like, can the issue wait to a later time? Like my uncertainty about going for a PhD or stopping at a master's degree, like that can wait until after I have my bachelor's and until I'm pursuing my master's degree. Or do I need to investigate further now, like with chemistry, because there's a timetable now, the clock is ticking, and I start classes in April, and I'm going to need to know pretty soon whether chemistry is something that I can learn and handle or not. And then you can also do an annual, like a 6-month or annual review of your uncertainties. Like review your career plan each year and kind of adjust it as needed. And then, putting your plan to action. Define what your next actions are going to be. Like right now, mine is to obtain a bachelor's in botany. And then focus on the next actions that are small. So for me, that's to continue to study chemistry before classes start, research more into possible careers to keep narrowing it down, perhaps go to effective altruism conferences or look into that kind of networking, because helping is something that I am really into and drawn to. Like, I want to help. I want to help people. I want to help animals. I want to help the earth. I want to help my friends and my community, and I want to help, further out, like with the state or the country that I'm in, or globally if possible. What to look for in a high impact career. It talks about like the problem, the global problem that the work that you're looking into addresses, the opportunities for how effective is that specific opportunity for addressing the global problem, and personal fit, like how well you are able to take advantage of the opportunity to help with a global issue, while also working in a place that, fits well for you, that you enjoy being at and working in. There are general areas of work that you can go into that are impactful careers that can help the world. Some of these are like government and policy in an area relevant to one of the top problems. There's also organization building and effective nonprofits. You can start by making a list of all the nonprofit organizations that address the top global problem that you're wanting to help with, the ones that have large-scale solutions to that problem and are well run. And then you can consider any job where you might be able to have a good personal fit within those organizations or relevant to those organizations, like being a vendor for them or something. This can also include outreach or management, operations, research, etc. And speaking of research, like research is its own impactful career for relevant areas. Research doesn't just have to be academic. Like, you don't have to just be studying at a university. Like, you can do research for nonprofits, for corporations, for governments, or think tanks. You can also support other researchers in a complementary role like a project manager or an executive assistant, fundraising or operations administrative work. And it can be useful to have graduate training prior to taking on these roles just to give you a better perspective of what's needed and the mindset to have for that. There's also like international relations, public policy, a lot of big topic things right now are like synthetic biology, bioengineering, genetic engineering, all good ideas to go into research in. Communication is also a big one, like translating and interpreting, obviously, but it can also be outreach and advocacy as well. Journalism, blogging, like getting ideas out there or connecting people with each other to help. And here's another link I'm going to include below for the United Nations global issues. There's a whole lot of global issues that they mention on the list. I would highly encourage you to go to that link and check out the list of global issues, see which ones are most important to you, and then go through and see, how best you think that you could help with those. And then things that you yourself can do now, so you can start building up a support system, like whether it's friends, family, a club or group at school, or even like a group on social media, just someplace you can go to where people who support you can help bounce ideas off of, or to just cheer you on your goal or help you problem solve the uncertainties and problems that you have with your plan that you're not sure where to go next with, how to find resources for, or what to fix. You can ask your friends and family what they think your strengths are and what you might excel in. Like at one point when I was posting on social media about this, somebody commented that with how I was talking and the things I was interested in, that I could even be pretty useful, like working in the public health sector. You can take free classes, either whether it's through Allison or EDX. I'll leave some of these links so that you can check them out if you want to, explore a few topics and see what things you might be interested in that pique your interest to look into later. YouTube videos, there's a bunch of channels. I'll leave some of them so that you can take a look at them. But it's a good way to hear from others in the fields that you're thinking of going into before actually getting into that field, to see whether it's going to be a good fit for you so that you know better what to expect from that field. Focus on things that you need and want in the future. Having a place that accepts cats is essential. I'm not going to budge on that. For you, that might be focusing on ways to transport and live with your family, with your kids, whether you are open or not to having roommates, if you want to live someplace in particular, if you want somewhere just as cheap as possible. Like, focus on the things in your day-to-day that you absolutely need and will not budge on, and keep those in mind throughout this entire process when you're trying to figure out what you want to do with your life, because you should not have to budge on those things that are necessary for you. Like, I will not leave my cats. I just won't. Like, if it came down to it, like if moving overseas meant that I wouldn't be able to bring the cats, then I simply wouldn't go overseas. I'd just stay where I am now, continue the plan here, things like that. So don't lose track of what is most important to you, whether that's your family, your kids, your pets, your own needs, like whether you really need to be alone and don't want any roommates, or whether you need to be around people and need roommates, and whether you need that mental and social stimulation. Make a rough budget for what career you think you might be in, or after college, what you think you might need. I can go into this in another video too, as to how to budget and what to look for, but mostly look at things in your area or the area that you're wanting to be in, of what, the rent looks like, what it costs to purchase the home, what general utilities might cost, things like that. Just focus on what you need to be making in order to survive, and whether you need to make more to take into account like amounts that you want to save up. Say, I want an emergency fund at all times of like $5,000. So include that in your budget. And make sure that you include like a slot in your budget for savings that you can put away each month. So like that would be your ideal budget, is to have that amount left over extra that you can put into savings, because you want to have an idea of how much you need to make a year to survive and thrive and be comfortable. And or if you don't want to just be comfortable and if you want to live in luxury, that is okay too. Just have a budget in mind for that, of how much you need to be making a year to accomplish that goal, because you don't want to take on a job or go into a career field where the average income for it is less than what you need to survive, or less than what you need to be happy and fulfilled. So to wrap up all of this, I hope that this helped some of you. Please leave comments with your own path, like your own career path that you're thinking of so far. Like if anything mentioned in this video gave you a new perspective on things, or how your plans have changed over the years, what your motivations are for pursuing something in particular, especially any additional resources that you think could help other commenters out in their own journeys to figure it out. I'd like to hear from you guys. I miss making videos. I miss this little community that we've built. But this video was an important topic that I wanted to make just so I could help you all out with hopefully making your lives better, or giving you just an idea of how to narrow things down to sort of get you to the point where you want to be. Like, work is half of your life. Like, there's no reason to succumb to despair and misery of working in a place that you hate or that is toxic or abusive, when there's no reason for you to stick around there. So just research, make a game plan, and then take those steps to achieve your goals. Like, you can do this. To my peers, like in your 30s, 40s, whatever, it ain't too late. You only live once. There's no reason to stick to one thing or to stay in a career that won't suit your needs later in life. Pursue your old or new dreams and passions. Like, we can still make a difference as adults. It's not too late. And for you teenagers and you younger adults, like in your 20s, just still figuring out where you fit in this world and what you want to do, my heart goes out to you. Between the last few presidential elections, if you live in the USA, our country has been taking steps backwards with progress. And I'm so sorry that you are like becoming adults in this environment. It's certainly not ideal, and you deserve better. But like dealing with the COVID lockdowns and like remote schooling from COVID and the never-ending firearm fatalities at schools around the country, I understand a little bit of how you feel, but I can only imagine how you all must be feeling starting your adult lives in this environment. Like, maybe you're feeling defeated and not feeling very hopeful for the future, or maybe it's the complete opposite and you feel determined and or angry and you're raring to go to make changes and fix things, and fix what we older generations have failed in, because we have failed you. Like, that is true. And I'm so sorry. Like, personally, I'm going to do what I can to make changes now in my 30s, 40s, and beyond to help you and the younger generations that are still to come have better lives. But you all deserve better. Like, maybe you're lost and you're not sure what to do, or if there's anything that you can do. Just whatever you are feeling and going through, I hope that some of the information that I've provided in this video has helped with you and your journey to discover yourself and what you are meant for, or to help make the world a better place, or even just to make it through this current chapter of your life. And for those of you who, like, all you can do right now at this point is simply focus on surviving and getting through each day, that is okay. And you just keep focusing on that. Like, survival is the most important. It's hard to focus on anything other than that while you're in that state. So you do what you have to do to survive. And when you can, focus on other things and, thriving, ideally. Then I hope that some of what I've put in this video can help you at that point. But To both the young and my peers and older viewers too, I am sending my well wishes to you all. I hope this helped you.